Well, it's yet another ranked team coming to face the Knights. BYU Cougars are heading to Orlando to take on UCF. Can the Knights get it done? Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Charge On. As always, I'm your host, Sean Green. Before we get started, a quick word from our sponsor, Bet Online. Basketball fans, it's that time of year again. The NBA is back. From opening tip-off to buzzer beaters, Bet Online has you covered with the best odds, biggest promotions, and live in-game betting on all your favorite teams. This season, every game matters. BetOnline has every stat, matchup, breakdown, and live odds to bet on during the game. And it's not just the NBA. BetOnline has odds on everything from football, MLB playoffs, NHL to political props. Head to the website today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. Talk a little bit about basketball, not UCF basketball, but Orlando Magic starting playing tonight. We're recording on Wednesday. You're seeing this on Thursday, so hopefully you're waking up to a Magic win to start the season 1-0. But UCF basketball is starting soon, and we're going to be doing some coverage with that. But with that being said, Nick, it seems like we're in Groundhog Day. I've been saying that for the past couple weeks. It seems like just Groundhog Day each week. Same thing with last year. UCF is 3-4. They were the same position last year. Coming off of a close ranked matchup on the road, but still losing. And then having to face a tough team the next week. Now, granted, West Virginia wasn't ranked at the time, but getting a ranked BYU team, top 15 team, coming into the Bounce House in week 2. How excited are you to see the squad once again, and how you feeling heading into this week?
I mean, this game certainly has a lot more buzz, I think, obviously now than it did at the beginning of the year. I think it was one of those games you looked at the schedule and you went, okay, BYU at home, and you kind of just you looked at the game after. It was like you thought the BYU game going into the season was sort of sandwiched in between two big games, which was Iowa State and Arizona. And now it's like, stop the presses here. This has now suddenly become, regardless, you can rank Iowa State ahead of BYU or BYU ahead of Iowa State. I think they're actually 10 and 11 respectively in the ranking, so there's really not much differentiating them from the AP poll. So if you want to say last week was probably maybe a tiny bit of a tougher game because you had to go on the road, that's the good thing, is at least you get this game at home, but it's a big-time opponent playing great football right now. We're going to dive into it, but I'm definitely looking forward to it. I know the BYU fan base, generally, they have a large fan base all over the country, obviously, so I'm thinking they're probably going to be a pretty good contingency of blue in the stadium. I wouldn't freak out necessarily about it if I'm a UCF fan. I think that there's just certain fan bases that are able to do that. BYU is certainly one of them, so it's going to be a cool environment for sure. And definitely looking forward to it because the fact that BYU is a really good football team, and regardless of where UCF is right now as a program, I think generally you want to play these good teams. You want to see how you measure up, and it's another chance to do that.
Yeah, I definitely want to emphasize to UCF fans not to freak out on Saturday. BYU fans show up. I actually was talking with some people early in the week. I think it's going to be like a 60-40 split. And that's crazy for me to say. Maybe I'm over-exaggerating, but BYU fans, I know a lot of people that are going to this game, and a lot of them are BYU fans. So do not be shocked, just putting that out there. Nick, before we jump into it, and like I always say, time codes are down below. So for all you BYU fans that are here, or UCF fans, and just want to listen to the game preview, the time code is down below. We're not going to spend too much time on this, but a little Sean rant to start, and I want to get your take, Nick, on this, because
Sean rant. We don't give many of these.
We don't. It takes something very specific to get me to rant, and this is one of them. So, Kaven call, and I want to preface this. College players transfer all the time. They do, right? And this is no different. Player redshirting and transferring. That's the new age of college football. So I want to preface that by saying this. He announced yesterday he's transferring, and he wrote a really well-written letter to Coach Gus Malzahn, which he put in the mail, gave it to Gus, but he took a picture and put it on his socials. I didn't think anything of it until I read it. and it kind of blew up on Tuesday night. And I found one part very, I guess disturbing would be the right word. Maybe not, I don't know, but it's the word that's coming to my mind right now. It is disturbing. And I want to read an excerpt from that letter. If you guys want to go read it yourself, I'm sure many of you already have, but go check it out at Kaven Call 7. He said this, and he said, Chief of Staff Ross Newton stated that if I redshirted, there would be a stigma attached to my name. My team would see me as a quitter, and I bailed out on the team. He stated if another school called about me, he was going to tell the truth. I was a good football player, good work ethic, respectful to coaches, leader among my peers, but I bailed on my team during the season. Imagine hearing that I would be talked about in a negative manner when I did everything I was asked to do as a member of the team. I didn't want to clean out my locker, but I was told to do so. And I did. I didn't want to leave the team, but I was told to do so, and I did. Thank you for the opportunity to be a UCF Knight. He also made it very clear in an above section that he was enjoying the process of the team. There was no part of him that was thinking of bailing on the team. He was a member of the team. He said on September 17, 2024, he was completely blindsided when he was told by Chief of Staff Ross Newton that if he redshirted, he'd be kicked off the team and expected to clean out his locker. He talked with Coach Ingram about redshirting to get ready for the next season. There was no talks of redshirting to transfer. So, Nick, I've never heard of Ross Newton. I know he was on the staff, worked with Gus at Auburn, in the player personnel kind of landscape area, whatever you want to call it. I frankly don't care. There's a serious problem within UCF athletics, and specifically UCF football, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Because I think a lot of people, when I tweeted out right as soon as I saw it that we're going to talk about this on the next Charge On, and we're going to, serious questions need to be asked. I kind of got a lot of similar responses, which I was kind of surprised about. And the similar responses, I can read a couple while we're talking about it, but some of them were, he was going to redshirt to see his options, it's fine. He wanted to redshirt to find a new place. This happens all the time in college athletics. This is different. Granted, there's always two sides to every story. There is. And we don't know the coach's side. We don't know if that was actually the case. But from everything I've heard about Kaven Call, is he is a fine young man. He had one of the biggest recruits to commit to UCF, was vital in one of the recruiting classes in the past couple of years to get guys to come into the program. Have never heard a bad word about him. And we've heard for 2 years, Nick, that he was, especially this past spring and fall, that he was impressing and that he was going to get some playing time, all this stuff. Now, if let's just say he wanted to transfer. He wanted a redshirt and he wanted to transfer. I don't get that vibe. I don't think that's the truth. But let's just say that's the case. For any coach in America to threaten a 18, 19, 20-year-old kid and say that you're going to tell schools the truth about you and kind of threaten to disparage your name, I think is one of the worst things I've ever heard come out of a college athletics program. And that might be over-exaggerating it, potentially. I think if a kid has character concerns, yes, I think you have every right to tell a college that he might be wanting to go to about character concerns. But from everything I've heard, this is a fine young man that's done nothing but show support for his school, not wanting to leave his school, but was forced to because a chief of staff that nobody really knows about and is behind the scenes basically said you need to leave, and also threatened if that he was to redshirt that he would intentionally go tell schools the truth. I think it's sick. When I read it, I was sick to my stomach. We haven't heard the other side. Somebody's asking on Monday to Gus. I know that for a fact. If nobody does, I will be the one to do it. When you read this, Nick, what was your first reaction?
My first reaction is this is the part of college football that you just hate. I mean, it's the ugly side of it. It's I guess I was about to say it's sort of the business side of it, but I almost stopped myself. But at the same time, it's what college football has become. It's one giant business. We know that. I hate it for Kaven first and foremost because, you talk about loyalty to a program and being a great ambassador to the program. I think Kaven Call absolutely was that. You look at when UCF beat Florida in the 2021 Gasparilla Bowl, first person to commit to the 2023 class was Kaven Call. And Kaven Call is from Apopka, Florida, which is nearby UCF, obviously. So he's basically a hometown kid. I'm sure he was I'm not sure, but I'm assume he was a big UCF fan probably and wanted to go there. And so he was able to live out that dream. And then according to his side of the story here, he's told by, the chief of staff at UCF that, hey, if you make this decision, I'm going to go and tell every coach what you did and you quit on this football team. It's nasty. It smells awful, quite honest with you. As you mentioned, there's a lot of people that are saying this happens at other places in college football all the time. And it is kind of interesting. Yesterday, before Kaven put out that statement, we got a statement from an Indiana player. EJ Williams is his name. He put out a very similar statement on Twitter. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to read a little bit of a snippet of it here. It's going to sound very similar. He said, I'm not on the team anymore because I opted to get surgery to have a better opportunity to compete at playing time, be 100% healthy, and help contribute to a great football team next year. I made this decision because the team was perfectly fine without me in the game, and I also want to have a chance at being able to continue my career at the professional level. While making this decision, my coach saw it as quitting on the team, so if I was to redshirt, I wouldn't be able to come back to the program next season. So that was from EJ Williams, who, again, was at Indiana, and he said my coach, so obviously I'm assuming he's talking about Cignetti. So yes, there are other examples of this happening. I don't like it. I think every player has to make the decisions for themselves and what they want to do. Every program has to do the same as well. But there shouldn't be any hard feelings on it. There shouldn't be any bad blood when it happens because it's part of college football. You're allowed to do it by design. And I think coaches, and this happens a lot in college football, do we say that coaches quit on their team when they take jobs at inopportune times? I think that's a fair statement to make. I mean, coaches have the ability to move and go and do other things at any time when they see fit. But when players make those decisions, coaches scoff at it and try to say, well, he's quitting on our team. I don't know. Looks like a double standard to me. To my knowledge, unless you've seen anything, I haven't seen UCF players going on Instagram or Twitter or anything saying anything about Kaven Call, don't let the door hit you on the way out or anything. A little bit different when Brian Threats did it, no? When one of your leaders, Lee Hunter, was going on Instagram and basically, I can't remember what he said exactly, but he was pretty vocal about what Brian Threats did leaving the program. So I don't see there's any issue between the players and what Kaven did. And so like I said, I hate this part of the business, but first and foremost, I hate it for Kaven Call because I think he clearly wanted to be a UCF Knight. And now that's not happening anymore.
He says, I simply requested a redshirt year to continue to build and be a contributing factor for the team. His words. Those are his words. Now, again, I don't know there's always two sides and then there's the truth. So there's three sides to every story. But when I don't care. I don't care if his intention was to transfer. I really don't. At the end of the day, you recruited this kid. He stayed loyal to you for basically 2-3 years. He stayed committed to you the entire year from December until the next November. And he stayed committed to you. Didn't even think about going to another school. Worked his butt off for your program. Did everything he was asked to do. Never a character concern brought up. His name was getting thrown out a bunch as a freshman that he was turning eyes. And then this past spring and fall that, he's, making leaps and bounds. But then to have, and again, his words in this letter got told from Ross Newton, allegedly, that there'd be a stigma attached to his name. My team would see me as a quitter, and I bailed on the team. And he said if another school called about him, he was going to, quote unquote, tell them the truth. Yeah. Not the end. We're going to get to BYU. All I can say is that it makes me sick to think a grown man is threatening a young man who, again, if there's character concerns, you can, by all means, say, listen, I'm gonna be honest with schools about you, but we wish you well. At the end of the day, you could have handled this a lot better. Said, hey, Kaven, unfortunately, we don't want guys to redshirt. We wish you nothing but the best, man. Go if anybody calls, we'll give a glowing recommendation. But you didn't. You basically threatened him by saying, if you redshirt, I'll have no problem telling schools the truth. So that's where it gets icky, and that's where I don't want nobody that is doing stuff like that should be associated with the UCF football program. If that's how you are talking to 18, 19, and 20-year-olds that have done nothing but work for you.
And consider, too, like some of the reaction from former players to this, and I bring up a simple tweet here from Nikai Martinez, who obviously was in that same class, I believe, with Kaven, right?
Yep.
In the 2023 class, and he transferred out this year to Michigan State. He said, man, only if y'all knew what was really going on behind closed doors. And he's not the only player that has said things about this current staff and the current football program and the way things take place, and obviously not going into detail about it necessarily, but just putting out little nuggets out there of like, hey, you might want to pay attention to what's going on behind the scenes a little bit. So we don't know, obviously, but it can't be a great look. There's no doubt about it. It's compounded by the fact that when you've lost 4 games in a row, and stuff like this happens, it looks even worse, doesn't it? Like, I think there's a lot of unrest in the UCF fan base right now with the current administration, and that doesn't just include Gus Malzahn. That includes Terry Mohajir. You see it every single day on Twitter. We all see it. There's a million tweets from UCF fans every single day tagging Gus Malzahn and tagging Terry Mohajir, asking them to resign, asking for him to be fired. It's just been that kind of few weeks here, right? So when this happened yesterday, I guess I knew immediately. I'm like, well, there's not going to be many rational reactions to this. Like, it's just not going to happen. And obviously, this was the big topic late last night and into the morning. But yeah, it just sucks. It just sucks that this is what college football has, sort of become, and that there's a dirty side to it, as there is with every business. And like I said, the thing that can't get lost here is I feel genuinely terrible for Kaven Call. Again, we don't know the coaching staff side of it. I don't know if Gus is going to be asked about this at some point, because I don't think he speaks until right after the game.
I don't think he's going to be asked about it post game.
Yeah, I don't think he'll be asked about post game, but he'll probably get asked Monday, and we'll see what sort of explanation, if Gus wants to go into it or if he'll, offer a no comment. We'll see.
Well, then he's getting asked to follow up. And listen, I want to be very clear. If it was simply I requested a red shirt, they told me they didn't want me to do that, and we went our separate ways, this isn't a story. It's the fact that the chief of staff of UCF football is threatening a 19, 20-year-old kid and saying, basically, I'm going to ruin your reputation with anybody that calls me. That's where that's where the problem is arising. It's not, I could care less about if he was going to redshirt to transfer, if he was going to redshirt to stay, if he was going to play it out. I could care less. And I think that's where people are not understanding where the unrest is. For me, I think when you're trying to disparage a young man for no reason, that's where there's a line where, what are you doing? Like, that's absolutely ridiculous. So that's where I'm frustrated, and that's where I'm upset for Kaven. And if it's happening to Kaven, I'm sure it's happening to other players that maybe are dealing with the same thing. So, long discussion for maybe a topic that maybe we shouldn't have discussed that long, but sucks for some of these players, and hopefully stuff like that doesn't continue to happen, and hopefully that this is him putting out a statement like that, if it is true, helps it not happen moving forward. and helps it kind of get nipped in the bud real quick. All right. You ready to talk some BYU?
Yeah, before we get to BYU, because I feel like not this is not on Kaven call here. We're moving on. But before we get into BYU, I feel like I have to give my thoughts a little bit. Maybe you had thoughts too on Gus's presser the other day.
I was there.
You were there. You were asking questions, of course. And so I guess the big thing was he officially named Jakari the quarterback 1 and EJ's the 2. And
I think me and you have the same thought on this too.
I think we do have the same thought on this, and I don't know if I'm crazy or not, but what in hindsight, I know it's easy to be, armchair quarterback on it, but in hindsight, what was the point of starting EJ Colson against Cincinnati? What did we gain out of this? Because if Jakari's the quarterback 1 going forward, and let's just say he plays every snap, what did I get out of having EJ Colson play in that start that game? How is it that EJ went from being ahead of Jakari on the depth chart 2 weeks ago, less than 2 weeks ago actually, and gets 3 drives, well actually more, like 2.5 drives, and 2 of them ended in a fumble. He throws 4 passes. You don't even really get a chance to see the complete EJ Colson experience, right? And I understood in the flow of the game, Jakari came in and looked a little better. You ride with him, whatever. But for as great as Jakari was on the ground the other night against Iowa State, are we going to ignore the fact that UCF threw for 62 passing yards and completed 4 passes after the first quarter? Are we going to ignore that, Sean? It's just odd to me that after that performance against Iowa State, all of a sudden we've seen what we need to see, and Jakari's quarterback 1 and EJ's the 2. So I guess I'm just lost here a little bit, and I've tried to hold on to the fact that, I keep saying growing pains, you're going to go with growing pains, but I've probably looked over the fact that, Jakari's 21 years old. Realistically, how much better is he going to get? EJ Colson, I know, is going to get better. But how much better is Jakari Brown going to get? So, I don't know. Something about this sort of just doesn't make much sense to me. I might be blowing it way out of proportion, but I just find it interesting that EJ Colson, I'm going to do math in my head here, actually, on the spot. 11 days ago, EJ Colson was quarterback 1. And 11 days later, he's quarterback 2. And I saw 2.5, I saw not even half, like 2 in a play of a third drive out of him.
Oh, and also don't forget, instead of just throwing KJ out of there for the 1 play against Iowa State when Jakari's helmet came off, instead you threw EJ out there for the 1 play and burned a game on his potential. If he has 2 more games, then he burned.
And he did. And if I'm correct too, he didn't have to do that because there was a timeout in, or there's something that happened right in between that, right?
There was a timeout, but I think I'm sure they did it for a reason. I think they thought they had to do it.
So that 1 play burned a game for EJ.
Yep. You sound like me because listen, people in our post game show or our post game pod were saying he's quarterback of the future, and we talked about on the post game show. We said he's got potential. But it's
got a lively
potential
arm.
The potential is different than an EJ Colson potential. His
Correct.
potential is he's 21 years old. He's been in college for 3 years, and he can get marginally better at the end of the day. And listen, we had a couple people reach in our DMs and basically say that we need to be more positive, and said that instead of talking about him missing the throws, we should talk about that he threw it to the open guy. That we should give gold stars now for that.
So your positivity. That's not my standard. That's not my standard.
And I think ultimately, Nick, and I think this goes into a greater discussion.
62 passing yards is 62 passing yards.
Yeah, and I get it. And that's the thing. We could say, they have such a good defense. Well, the guys were open. So good defense or not, if the guys are open, you got to make the throws. I think it's very simple. I think it's a very simple answer. Might not be the right answer. I think they know EJ is the better quarterback. There's a reason why they started him against Cincinnati. He was clearly the better quarterback. I think ultimately they're paying Ja'Carri a lot of money, and it's not about money. I've said it's not about money. If he's not the guy, they're going to sit him. They need to determine if he's the guy next year. Basically, everything just got fast-tracked. So they thought they were going to have KJ for a year, then they thought they were going to have Ja'Carri, and then you have EJ. That was the order that it was supposed to go. Well, KJ's year just got condensed to 4 games. And I think they're like, okay, we'll go to EJ. But then when they started thinking about it, I think they thought about this after the Cincinnati game, where they're like, well, we're going to have a quarterback competition. I think they realized we need to give Ja'Carri a fair shake, see if he is the guy. And if he's not, then we know we have EJ. And here's my analysis, and I might be wrong on this. I think you get BYU. I think you get Arizona. I think if he throws really bad against BYU, and then you get a bad half of throwing against Arizona, I think EJ comes in against Arizona and plays the rest of the season. But I think if he throws marginally better the rest of the season, then I think they ride it out with Ja'Carri, and then they go into a full-on quarterback competition in the next season. But I think they're paying him a lot of money, and I think they're like, we're not just going to throw him behind EJ without giving him a fair shake, when that was kind of the original plan anyway. Might not make a lot of sense. If EJ's the better quarterback right now, then you should put the better quarterback out there. But also, I think Gus loves the quarterback run game right now, specifically, and he's like, ooh, okay, we need to play with this shiny new toy.
It's the only productive play you have from your quarterback.
Basically. So, I don't know. It is what it is. But I'm telling you, if I bet, I'd put money on EJ Colson playing quarterback again at some point this year. I think that is going to happen. Don't know when, don't know where, but if Ja'Carri keeps putting up throwing performances like that, then you're going to see him pretty quick.
And I get it. Like if you throw EJ out into the Wolves right now, like on one side of it, he's getting those reps, he's getting a chance to adjust to the speed of the game and all those types of things, right? On the flip side of that, he could kill his confidence.
Yeah.
Like I understand that. So you have to really be smart about this as a coach. And Gus Malzahn obviously has been doing this for 30 years, and he's dealt with many different quarterbacks in many different situations. So I'm not going to sit here and claim like I know better than Gus Malzahn. I don't. I just am trying to, and again, in hindsight, I'm trying to figure out what was the point of EJ starting against Cincinnati when that's all we're right now looking to see.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. I don't get it, but we'll move on. We won't make a stink out of it. Ja'Carri Brown's your quarterback 1. There's no more controversy for now. So
that's why we're not getting paid the big bucks, because they're 5 pages ahead, Nick. They're 5 pages ahead of guys like us. But let's talk BYU, a team that I don't think is a hyperbole to say nobody thought would be in the position they are right now. They are undefeated. Really, I think in terms of watching teams play, I thought about this today. And this maybe doesn't give BYU enough credit. In terms of Iowa State, we talk about how they're 10 and 11. They're very similar teams in terms of just rankings and how they play. I would say BYU is I get more scared of BYU's offense than I do Iowa State's, in my opinion. And then I think defensively, I think you could do certain things against BYU that maybe you couldn't do against Iowa State, because their defense is, I think, a hair better. But I think what BYU makes up for maybe lack of talent in terms of Iowa State's defense, let me get that clear. BYU's defense is talented. They play hard. Like, this team flies to the ball. This team, even on offense, they are running around. They want to punch you in the mouth. They want to run the football on you. They want you to get worn down for 60 minutes. That's what UCF was supposed to be. BYU is that team. Now, I asked Gus this week, which he gave a decent answer, but I asked him, you have teams like BYU and Cincinnati who have taken that big leap. They're that next leap in the Big 12. And you guys are still kind of figuring it out. How disappointing is that? He goes, well, we're disappointed because we're us. We're disappointed for us. We're not focused on other teams. Good for them, but we're focused on us. So what have you seen out of BYU, obviously, to start this kind of 7-game winning streak? And how big of a shock was it to see kind of how they've played this beginning part of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's generally stunning to everybody. I think they were picked by many to be towards the bottom of the conference, and clearly they've been one of the best teams in college football. I mean, you look at the wins they've picked up. You go down the list. There's only two. I found this little nugget here when I was doing research for this. Only 3 teams in the country are 2-0 against ranked opponents currently: BYU, Oregon, and Georgia. Those other 2 teams are pretty good, no? 2-0 against currently bowl eligible teams: BYU and Georgia. And then 5-0 versus Power 4 teams is BYU, Oregon, Iowa State, and Notre Dame. So they've played a pretty legit schedule here so far. Wins over SMU, Kansas State. Arizona, we figured out, is not very good, but they dispatched them. And obviously Oklahoma State not having the season that we thought they were going to have, but they were able to pick up that win in dramatic fashion last week. And that was an incredible atmosphere down there in Provo. Is it not really down there, out there in Provo, I guess. Which, by the way, can't wait till UCF plays in Provo, because
we're going.
That's a bucket list. That's a bucket list place to be. I agree with what did Gus Johnson say a couple weeks ago? Like that's one of the coolest places to be in college football. I agree.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they've been one of the stories of the season. I think there's a lot of people talking about National Coach of the Year, and Curt Cignetti obviously is going to get a lot of shout for that. I think the team we just saw last week, Matt Campbell's going to get a lot of shout for that, but I don't think a lot of people have been talking about Kalani Sitake and the job he's done here at BYU. And again, picked by many to be near the bottom of the conference and to be sitting here right now, the number 11 team in the country according to the AP poll, and on the rise at the moment. So it's just they look like a very well-coached football team, a veteran football team, of course. They got some guys all over the place, so they present a lot of matchup nightmares that we're going to dive in here against UCF. So it's definitely going to be a challenge. I'm surprised when I look at the spread of this game. I know you told me off air it looked like UCF was favored. I actually went back and looked because I was like, there's just no way. I think BYU's a 1.5 favorite. It's only like a 1.5. So like my odds makers are really confusing me here, because I don't know how in the world it could be that close.
Well, there's a couple different. I'll say this: that like if you go on different betting sites, like Bet Online, I think has BYU favored, but like Hard Rock Bet has UCF favored by 2 now. It's actually gone up. So I have no idea. But
my point is the line should not be that close.
No, it should not. Look, we're gonna jump into the BYU team, but if you look at their next 5 games, their last 5 games technically, BYU has a really good chance to go undefeated here. And when you look at, they got UCF at Utah, which Utah is just not the same team. They have a really elite defense, but their offense with Wilson is just up and down. So that's a very winnable game for BYU. At home against Kansas, on the road against Arizona State, which is going to be a tough matchup, but I think BYU has the better team. And then at home versus Houston. You can make the argument that if BYU can beat UCF this weekend, they can go undefeated. And we talked about earlier, like in the season, like will there be 2 Big 12 teams in the college football playoff? Is there a road where that can happen? And I think with BYU and Iowa State, I think at this point, if both these teams win out, whoever loses in the championship, I think there is a lane where both those teams make the college football playoff. And
perhaps
I think that'd be good for the conference. Obviously, you want UCF to go out and kind of play upset this weekend. But BYU, to them, their credit, they've done an incredible job and they've built it the right way. They won 5 games last year and then have come back and already have 7 wins and are looking at a potential college football playoff berth. So credit to them. But let's get into their actual team, Nick, because we saw Gary Bohannon transfer there. We're thinking Gary Bohannon's going to be the starter. Like, okay, BYU, it should be an easy win on the schedule. But then come in Jake Retzlaff. I mean, dude is the epitome of dual threat. He's their leading rusher. He could throw a good ball, maybe not as accurate as you would like to be, but they don't need him to be just a pure passer. He does so many other things like run the football. Kind of prone to interceptions. I mean, he's thrown 7 on the year so far. 16 touchdowns, though, to 7 interceptions. What have you seen from him early? I think, in my opinion, he's probably the most dangerous in terms of dual threat. We saw Rocco Becht last week, but he wasn't really intentionally trying to run the football until the second half. Jake will be trying to run the ball the entire game. So what challenges does he present against the Knights?
Yeah, it's definitely those sort of dual threat capabilities that he has that sort of scare me, because you mentioned it. We watched this last week against Iowa State, and Rocco Becht, not exactly on the design runs, but UCF would get pressure, not able to bring him down. He'd scramble. They have struggles tackling him. They couldn't get off the field on third and some key fourth downs, and it was the same thing to Rocco, time and time again. And Rocco's a decent runner, but Retzlaff's he's in a different category. And I went back and watched, the game against Oklahoma State for a second time, and that was my big takeaway. Is he got out into open space and he made guys miss. I mean, he's surprisingly, I was going to say surprisingly athletic. He's very athletic, but obviously in open space, I mean, you're going up against some athletic defenders, and he was able to make guys miss. So that's definitely something I'm scared of. There's no doubt about that. And to the point about, you said that maybe not as accurate as a passer and maybe not all those things. It is kind of interesting. He's got the highest passing grade in the country when not blitzed. The highest passing grade in the country. So tells me at least that if you're UCF, you want to at least try to get pressure on this dude and see if you can try to force him to turn the ball over. He did that twice in the Oklahoma State game. Now, one of those was right at the end of half where, it's going to happen. But he had another bad pick there on the right sideline, down in the red zone, I believe it was. So he is prone for the turnover. But if UCF cannot get pressure on him based on what he's done this year, and as I just said, number one passer in the country when not blitzed, it could be a long, long day for the UCF defense.
Yeah, and I want to point this out. So he has 7 interceptions, but those have come from 4 different games this year. He threw 2 against SMU, he threw 1 against Wyoming, 2 against Baylor, and then 2 against Oklahoma State. What do all those games have in common? They were all fairly close, besides Wyoming, and that was only 1 interception. So the SMU game, they only won by 3. The Baylor game, they won by 6. And then the Oklahoma State game, they just won by 3. So you got to get him on the ground. He's run for 265 yards. You have to have a quarterback spy on him to make sure he doesn't get out of the pocket, but you got to turn him over. You got to sack him and you got to turn him over, because to beat BYU, they have to make the mistakes. They have to make the mistakes. As a defense, UCF has been able to create some turnovers in the last couple of weeks. They need to do it once again. And if you can turn BYU over, you can keep this game close. But if you kind of play like you did against Colorado, where you just get punched in the mouth for 60 minutes, there's a good chance that Retzlaff is going to make you pay for it.
Yeah, and late in that game against Oklahoma State, so Oklahoma State scores with, what was it, 32 seconds left, I want to say? And then on the very first play of that final drive there, it's another one of those sort of broken plays where he scrambles out to his right and picks up a big gain, and then throws a very nice ball to Darius Lassiter, and he runs into the end zone for a touchdown. So he was clutch, obviously late when they needed him. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12. I mean, the numbers sort of bear that out. I believe he's one of, where was it here? Oh my goodness. I have so many notes open for this game. He's one of 5 FBS quarterbacks with 250 plus rushing yards, 1,500 passing yards, and averaging 7.5 yards per play. So, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and really the country from a statistics standpoint, but certainly in the Big 12. So, I would not be underestimating him in this game. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I would not be underestimating, because I think he absolutely can beat you, and he can put a hurting on this defense.
Well, you mentioned Darius Lassiter a little bit, and I think we talk about the comparisons to Iowa State. Iowa State has 2 big-time receivers that have shown a lot early, two 500-yard receivers. It doesn't get any easier for UCF. You're kind of facing that again with Lassiter and Roberts, who have 7 touchdowns on the year respectively. So another week for the UCF corners, who really have to put in. I think they played well. They turned over Becht a couple times. They played good, but it was really when you got late, Nick, where they were, again, playing not to lose. So if you had to go back over and do it again, and now you're playing a team like BYU, who wants to run the football. Like, don't get it twisted. Like, if you look at their run game, they've run 236 times for just under 1,100 yards. They want to run it with Martin. Retzlaff runs it. They want to run it with Rapati. So, like, as a whole for this offense, is it very similar to the Iowa State game plan where it's really just need to stop the run, stop the quarterback design run, and not play 10 yards off receivers? Is that really what you have to do against this BYU offense?
I mean, that's kind of what jumped out to me in the OK State game. I mean, when they got behind, usually when you get behind, there's a tendency for teams to probably, obviously try to throw to get back in. Now, BYU was only behind by 7. I think it was 21-14 at this point in the third quarter, but they come right out in the third quarter and they ran 10 straight times. I think they scored a touchdown on that drive and didn't run it or didn't throw it once. So I think that's clearly what they want to do. And maybe Retzlaff is their leading rusher, but I think they got 2 sneaky good backs. I mean, LJ Martin being the guy who gets most of the carries, but Rapati as well. He seems like, from what I've watched, he seems to be maybe the quicker of the two. A change of pace guy that can get in there and just hit the hole and go. So there's definitely a lot to account for. You mentioned Lassiter, Eastern Michigan transfer. He's been great for them. And then Chase Roberts, ever since he's been a freshman, he's really produced. And this year he's on pace to have his best season yet here as a junior at BYU. Kind of similar to Iowa State. It's mainly 2 guys that the ball typically is going to go to, and it's going to be those 2 dudes. So you got to do your best to match up on them. But yeah, there's a lot of ways they can hit you. It's the second best scoring offense in the Big 12. So it's a big challenge.
It is. And I think if you're UCF, you've played the run decently well. You gave up some really head-scratching runs last week to the quarterback. And I think this week, if you're Ted Roof and company, you don't want the quarterback to beat you with his legs. So I think
that's the thing that I'm scared the most of here. It has to be.
Yeah, because you saw just how dangerous that was last week. Like basically all the 4th downs except one, it came off of a Rocco Becht run. He got 3rd downs on his own most of the time in that second half. So it's like, if you're looking at this game as a comparison, it's like, if UCF has a chance to win, the quarterback run game might be the reason you lose.
And it probably means in that UCF's going to be playing a lot in zone in this game, because the last thing you want to do with a quarterback who has the tendency to take off and run is you don't want to turn your back to him. You don't want your corners turning your back to him and giving him a lot of room to work with, because he will kill you. So I expect UCF to probably play zone, have a lot of guys with their eyes on Retzlaff, you like to think. But I mean, if I was a betting man, I'd say there's probably going to be a handful of plays where he's able to hurt you, and you're probably watching out for those 3rd and short situations, sort of how we saw in this Iowa State game, that are going to be key.
Yeah, it's a very dangerous offense, but let's kind of move over to the defense. This is a team defense if I've ever seen one. They play together. There's not 1 or 2 guys that do it. It's all 11 guys out on the field. You obviously have Harrison Taggart, who is their leading tackler, 45 tackles, 3 pass defenses, 1 interception, 1 forced fumble. He's really good. I mean, both their linebackers, even Jack Kelly, he's also really good. But if you watch this defense, Nick, they have struggled. I think this is where a lot of people, and maybe the line kind of is where Vegas is trying to insinuate, is they haven't been able to stop the run as well as you'd like. Last week, Oklahoma State, who has struggled to run the ball all year, had a field day on the ground. So, and they've struggled, especially last week, to stop the quarterback run, which we talked about. UCF struggled last week. So it is a really good defense. This defense, if it gets you behind the chains, you're not getting a first down. This is, in my opinion, a top 20 defense in the country. The stats don't necessarily tell you right now. I think they're 30th in the country. I think they are that good. I think they are a top 20 defense in the country. But if you're UCF, you've struggled in games to really run the ball. You kind of figured something out last week. But there are these home run kind of schemes where you get a big one and you go down and score a touchdown. But it's the intermediate runs where you're getting into 3rd and 5s and not being able to pick it up. If I were to tell you, for UCF to win this game, you need to get in 3rd and 2s basically every time you're in a 3rd down, or if not, you're going to lose this game. Am I crazy to say that?
No.
Or is it naive?
No. Stop me if you've heard this before. If UCF's going to win this football game, they have to run the football. It's the same strategy. Yeah, effectively. Let's add that one. Effectively. It's the same strategy every week that they're going to deploy. We know every team's going to be waiting for it, and you just have to find a way. You just have to, because there's just not much confidence in the passing game right now. And listen, Oklahoma State was able to run the ball really effectively against BYU last week. That is absolutely true. Ollie Gordon had his best game of the season, but it was deeper than him. And I bring up Garrett Ringel, who came in for a few series, I believe there was in that game. And he ran a beautiful read option play where he ran for 54 yards on one run against Oklahoma State. And I was watching Satake talk, might have been yesterday or right after the game. And that was the one thing that he sort of lamented, was the fact that they couldn't stop the run game. And in particular, he mentioned the quarterback run game, because Oklahoma State had not shown that in its previous 6 games. And, you know, they had a bye week. So obviously, they implemented that into their offense. They had a short week, quick turnaround, and it is what it is. You try to make the adjustments you can in game, but they could not stop it. So that's something that UCF, I'd like to think they can exploit, because for all of Jakari Brown's deficiencies, the one thing he's really good at is taking off and running. And we saw that big play, home run potential in the Iowa State game where he ran for 67 yards for a touchdown. So if I were guessing, you could certainly use one of those big plays in this game to help you, because like you said, in that Iowa State game, all the offense was, when they scored, it was really just those big gash plays that they would get. There are a few, you get 3 of those a game like they did the other day, you're going to be in most of the games you play. So they're probably going to have to rely on those. It's really not a sustainable way to play offense necessarily. They've still got to do a better job at generating enough push up front. Although I thought the offensive line played their best game of the season, or at least the best since they've started playing Power 4 opponents against Iowa State, especially in pass protection. I thought they were great all night. But there's too many plays when I went back and looked where R.J. Harvey, he's just making so many guys miss right at the line of scrimmage, and that's a credit to him, but it's not a credit to the blocking that's in front of him. And he keeps getting hit right away. They've got to do a better job at being able to get themselves in third and manageable situations. And when you get there, you probably should not be throwing deep. Probably should not be doing that, Sean. Can't be doing that. And you mentioned some of the impact players on defense. The one player that I did want to highlight today for when I was digging into BYU is Marku Collins, the corner. This dude, man, is special. He is special. Go back to the Arizona game. When he was matched up against McMillan, he had him in jail. He was great. And go back to the SMU game. At one point in that game, SMU was driving at the start of the fourth quarter, got near the red zone, and he makes an incredible play on the football, keeps his feet in bounds for a big sort of game-saving interception. That dude's been playing at as high a level as anybody in the country at corner this year. Why does that matter? Because UCF has one legit receiver. One. His name is Kobe Hudson. You might have forgot his name because they struggled to get him involved a little bit. But there's a chance that Kobe could be in jail a little bit this week. And I'm looking around at my receiving core and I'm going, anybody want to make a play? Anybody want to make a play? I'm looking at my quarterback. You want to successfully complete a pass to any of these dudes, you know? I joke, but at the same time, it's a real thing. It's a real thing. So, yeah, that's a long thing to say. That's a long ways to sort of sum it up and say that, yeah, UCF's got to run the football and they've got to do it sort of the same way they did against Iowa State. They got to have similar success, I believe, to have a shot.
Well, and I'll say this, and this is where my fear kind of creeps in. The credit with Oklahoma State is there is a fear of passing. There is a fear. I mean, this year they are a passing team. They really can't run the football. And when you are playing Oklahoma State, they had a good game plan, don't get me wrong. What happened after the TCU game? Colorado didn't have a week to prepare. They had another game. They had to play Baylor. And when they turned on the film for UCF, KJ ran great against TCU, right? Like, he had a lot of good runs that, you know, you just didn't know where he was going to be. And we thought, oh, this is looking really good. And then you play Colorado, and it seemed like KJ really couldn't do much. So the fear is that Jakari Brown started, caught Iowa State lacking in a lot of different run gaps and areas. they weren't expecting because they really didn't see him on film besides the Cincinnati game. And I think if I'm BYU, you're going to clean that. Like, you struggled against the quarterback run game all game last time, right? So your main focus this week is going to be, what does UCF do? They run the football. They can't throw. So just have a guy spy on the RPOs. Just one dude, just stay on the quarterback. Got a couple dudes, watch RJ Harvey, and then play man to man.
Can I make a comment here? This is to a larger point, but the more we talk about it, the more I'm just perplexed at this. Sean, UCF plays in the state of Florida, no?
Last I checked.
Yeah, last I checked too. And last time I checked, Florida is one of the most talent-rich places to find talent across the country, yes?
Usually.
Yeah, and specifically at the skill positions like receiver. How in the hell did we get here in the year 4 of the Gus Malzahn regime, and you got one legit receiver who was a transfer and a bunch of other dudes who probably should not be playing at this level?
That are also transfers.
Who are also transfers. How did we get here again? Could someone please remind me how this happened?
Ignorance is bliss.
Because all this stuff matters and sort of sums up why there are so many issues right now in the quarterback and the passing game, no matter who's throwing the football. Like, it's crazy. It's actually crazy. Like, I don't even pay attention much to even looking at UCF stats anymore. But what is the drop-off, Sean, from like Kobe to the next guy?
Oh, it's bad. I mean, I could tell you right now, it's bad. Let's just do that really quickly before we give our predictions, which are always very intriguing. Right here. So Kobe Hudson has 503 yards receiving, and the closest is RJ Harvey with 195 yards. And then Randy Pittman, I don't know how, but he has 177 yards receiving.
All right,
only
give me
catches.
the next receiver. Give me the next receiver.
Trent Whittemore, 99 yards.
Trent Whittemore?
Yep. And the closest one to Trent would be Xavier Townsend, who's no longer on the program. And the closest one to him is Javarius Johnson, 8 catches for 40 yards. That's where we've come to. That's where we're at. We're at basically the bottom of the barrel in terms of receivers that can make plays. And that sucks to see.
I'm so ready to see Burdell Richardson at some point.
I don't know why he's not.
Like, I don't. It can't get much worse, can it?
No. Let's go to predictions. Bet Online has UCF favored by 2. UCF is the favorite going into this game.
Hold on. Let me open my Hard Rock bet real quick.
Bet Online, our sponsor, has UCF favored by 2. And yes, Hard Rock has UCF favored by 2. ESPN has UCF favored by 2.
That's crazy.
For our BYU, listeners or viewers, we have learned over the last couple of weeks that it does not matter with UCF being favored. We've been favored, I think, every single week but last week. And I think the Florida week. So
Florida was favored by 2.
Yeah, Florida was favored. So Florida and Iowa State. So basically the road games. But UCF has been favored for every home game. Nick, do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
I'll go first this week.
All right, go ahead.
Listen, UCF put up a valiant fight last week that we weren't expecting. Credit to them, but you got to finish those games. Did not. I'm just concerned that after playing a game like that, like maybe we could say that in one of these games here, you thought, okay, one of those games against Iowa State or BYU, they're going to be in it. We just didn't know which one. Well, it happened to be Iowa State. Can you replicate a similar performance against BYU the week after? I'm not convinced. I'm just not convinced. I don't trust them. Sean. So I'm going to go BYU 33, and I'm going to go UCF 17. I'm going to go 33-17. 2 touchdowns. I'll keep it like that.
Okay. Very similar to you. We always knew there was going to be one game that you kind of felt UCF had the chance to win. And I thought it was this week. I thought it was going to be against BYU because not so much that they're the easier team, just that we were going to be at home. And Iowa State we've had marked down as a loss since the beginning that it got announced. what happened last season? Because again, we talked Groundhog Day. I'm bringing this in a full circle. This might be the first time we brought the podcast in a full circle. Set it up. It's Groundhog Day. It's all over again. Feels like we're doing the same thing. Went to Oklahoma last year and lost by 2 in a game that you should have won. Had the win. We're up by a lot. Not a lot, but you were up. And you lost at the end. What happened that next week? I remember vividly. We were in the stands. That was a hard game to watch.
It was hot, too.
It was hot. It was very hot. Against West Virginia. And you just get walloped. Four interceptions, 4 turnovers. West Virginia scored whenever they wanted. I think that was a noon kickoff, I think. But regardless, UCF had no chance in that game. I learned my lesson in terms of I do think this team can compete a little bit. I think a little. Maybe it's just they showed me something last week, but they haven't proven to me they can win a football game. Now with the quarterback they have now, they proved to me they can do a little bit more on offense. But folks, let's not get it twisted here. UCF's offense has not scored more than 21 points since TCU. I'm not counting the RJ Harvey touchdown last week.
Ouch.
I'm not counting it. For all you sycophants that are going to want me to include the RJ Harvey touchdown, I'm not doing it.
Hey, Gus said in his presser, remember he said we had 2 pick sixes, so he counted it. He didn't count it either.
So according to Gus, the offense has not scored more than 21 points since TCU. It's over a month. So they haven't put up over 21 points. I'm saying they score 21. That is UCF's margin. I think the defense is going to be able to create turnovers, so I think that will come into play. I think they'll be able to get 1 pick, but they won't be able to get 2. So I'm going. I'll go BYU 31, UCF 24. I'll say that. I'll say BYU 31, UCF 24. I think a 7-point. And if we really want to get crazy, 34-21. Like, probably in that margin. 34-21, 31-24. BYU has to travel all the way here. Kind of, hopefully, plays a factor. Didn't matter for Colorado. But, yeah, I think UCF drops another one and makes it 2 straight seasons with 5 straight losses, which will be fun to talk about after the game. Nick, any final thought?
Yeah, I was going to say it too. I forgot to even put this in there when we were talking about it. Retzlaff said the other day that he at UCF
best 3 and 4 team in the country.
Probably the best 3 and 4 team in the country, and I'm not up to date. I'm sorry, I'm not up to date on off my noggin here of all the other 3 and 4 teams in the country, but
I can assure you I don't think we are.
I think he's just being nice.
You think?
I think
maybe it's
nice.
Just being nice to the opponent before you play them. And
yeah, I hate to be so negative after a game where they lost by 3, but crazy things happen in college football every week. We know this. There are good teams who have off weeks sometimes, and there's bad teams that rise to the occasion. I still think UCF's a bad football team until further notice. Mm-hmm. And BYU, when they play close games, 18-15 against SMU, they come right back and they win 34-14 and then 38-9. And they play a close game against Baylor, 38-28. Then they come back and win 41-19. Now they just played a close game against Oklahoma State, and the trend is telling me that they're going to have their typical standout performance here. They are playing some inspired football, clearly. They got a lot to play for, can't afford to slip up, and so you're going to get their best. You're going to get your best in the bounce house on Saturday. We will be there. We will be there. Looking forward to it.
Pre-game and post-game show, as always. Come hang out with us. And hopefully we can talk a little positive. We don't want to be all negative. Hopefully we can talk some positivity on Saturday. And hopefully UCF can end the drought and get a W and go to 4-4. But we will see. Everybody, let me know what you think down in the comments. What's your score prediction? Like I said, I got it. I have 2, 31-24 or 34-21. It's going to be in that range. Maybe that's cheating, but who cares? Nick's got it. Basically blowout, 33-17. Drop in the comments down below. What do you think? Let us know. Please like, subscribe, comment, share. Do all that you do. We greatly appreciate it. Like I said, pregame, postgame show. Subscribe. Follow us on Twitter. Follow our new Twitter at Charge On Podcast. We'll be posting all of our stuff on all of our socials, so make sure you tune in for that. All right, everybody. This has been Charge On Bet Online. We will see you after the game.